When multiplying complex numbers, we know that in standard form you just have to distribute everything, but we'd actually like to look at what it is if we multiply in trigonometric form, and we find actually a really cool thing happens. I'm going to look at two numbers. I'm going to call them Z1 and Z2. These are going to be two complex numbers written in trigonometric form. So a Z1 we're going to say is R1 cis of theta 1, and Z2 is R2 cis of theta 2. Now remember what this really means is this is R1 cosine of theta 1 plus R1 sine of theta 1 times I. And this is similarly R2 cosine of theta 2 plus R2 sine of theta 2 times I. And very often we'll just factor the R1 and the R2 out. And actually I'm going to do that here. That means that it's this and this. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to go ahead and multiply these numbers, and we're going to do a little bit of algebra and some trigonometry to find out, to see what happens. So Z1 times Z2 is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to take these forms right here and multiply them. So R1 times cosine theta 1 plus, I'm going to write this as I sine of theta 1 times R2 cosine theta 1, theta 2 plus I sine of theta 2. And now we're going to do a little bit of work distributing. So first of all, I'm just going to take R1 times R2. Okay, that's R1, R2. Now, multiplying these two things, I'm going to have to distribute, right? So I'm going to take my cosine of theta 1 times cosine of theta 2. And that's going to be cosine theta 1 cosine theta 2. All right, and then I'm going to take this cosine theta 1 times I sine of theta 2. So that's going to be plus I cosine theta 1 sine theta 2. And then we're going to take this I sine theta 1 times cosine theta 2. That's plus I sine theta 1 cosine theta 2. And then finally, the I sine theta 1 times I sine theta 2 is plus I squared sine theta 1 sine theta 2. All right, now there's a lot going on here, but maybe you're starting to see some things that look familiar. If I look at, say, this cosine theta 2, cosine theta 2, and then over here, remember that I squared is negative 1. This is negative 1. So this whole thing over here just becomes minus sine theta 1 sine theta 2. So I'm going to combine those two things because those are just both real things. I get cosine theta 1 cosine theta 2 minus sine theta 1 sine theta 2. Okay, then I've got these other two terms, and those two terms, those are my I terms. And so I'm going to factor the I out of those. So I get plus I times, and then I get cosine theta 1 sine theta 2 plus sine theta 1 cosine theta 2. Now, this is where we should be recognizing some things. This right here is the identity for cosine of theta 1 plus theta 2. Cosine of theta 1 plus theta 2. Okay, and then we have plus I times, this thing right here is the identity for sine of theta 1 plus theta 2. Sine of theta 1 plus theta 2. And now notice what we have. We simply have here R1, R2, and this is cosine of something plus I times the sine of that thing. That I have my abbreviation, that's cis theta 1 plus theta 2. And this is our most powerful thing. When multiplying complex numbers, notice that all we're doing is multiplying the absolute values and then the angles. We just add the two angles for those two complex numbers. A very, very powerful identity.